And welcome into a special Hoopsville On Demand podcast here in the off-season. I am your host of Hoopsville, Dave McHugh. I hope you are all having an enjoyable summer and off-season as we prepare, believe it or not, for the 2012-2013 season, which at this recording is approximately, practices are 2.5 months away. The season starts in about 3.5 months. And while this may be a quiet period before students get on campus and then get ready for practices, be with their coaches, obviously football and soccer and the fall sports starting sooner, doesn't mean there's not a lot of news, and we've tried this offseason to at least bring you some of that news as well. Hope you enjoy this podcast. Just a quick reminder, you can email the show at hoopsville@d3hoops.com. That's hoopsville at d3hoops.com. In the offseason, you can also email me as well. Any questions you may have, even following this interview that we're about to do with the new men's basketball committee chair for the NCAA, we'll try and get those questions asked for you. Remember, there's been some other previous podcasts. Dan Dutcher, the vice president of Division III, joined us earlier this summer to talk about the new basketball tournament for Division III, which we will touch on in this as well. We also talked to the new men's basketball coach at York College after 35 years. We talked to him. We'll have some more coming up. There's been a lot of changes in conferences and other things, so we'll try and get you covered as we lead up into November. By the way, the first Hoopsville broadcast will be, hopefully, knock on wood, Thursday, November 15th of the weekly broadcast. That is the first day of the regular season for Division III basketball, so we hope you can enjoy that and join us for that. We'll then go every Thursday for the most part up until the Christmas break, and then we'll take a break ourselves and then start our usual twice-a-week broadcasts of Sunday and Thursday, leading you all the way up, this time to Atlanta, Georgia, where the Division III championship game will be held. Lots to cover in between then and now. Times and all that stuff will be determined, but just a heads up, but obviously the on-demand will take place as well. As I mentioned, a new basketball committee chair. We've had one for a few years here. Most recently, Ken Schumann out of the West region was our committee chair. Before that, Dave Martin out of Misericordia was stepped up to the plate. We've had others as well. And now we got a new 1-year term, and that gentleman is Coach Mike DeWitt from Ohio Wesleyan. We will talk to him as we get him here. Coach, welcome to Hoopsville On Demand here in the off-season.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Well, I appreciate you joining me. Thanks so much. You and I chatted in Salem, as I tend to do with a lot of the coaches who are around Salem, and obviously we chatted about the fact that there was a new committee chair coming, and there were a couple different choices. Really, it came down to two. It was yourself or Terry Small, the commissioner in the NJAC. We'll talk about Terry in just a minute, but obviously they gave the nod to you, and it sounds like you're both apprehensive and excited to take on this new gig.
Yeah, and Terry and I work very well together and have worked together on a committee for 3 years, and we kind of had a mutual agreement that I would take the responsibility and criticism that the job comes with. And I look forward to working with Terry and the other members of the committee this year to make this tournament and this year as good as we possibly can for the student athletes.
Terry's a good guy, but I do sense he'd like to rather stay in the background and probably not appear on shows like Hoopsville.
Yeah, that very well could be the case.
Terry joined you. You, Terry, and Steve Ulrich, the chairman of the commissioner of the Centennial Conference out of the Mid-Atlantic. The only returning members this year, we'll touch on that just a little bit more. You and Terry are in your 4th year on the committee, which is your last. Steve is in his 2nd, so he'll have 2 more on the way. And let's just prognosticate, there's a good chance Steve could be committee chair next year since you got so many new ones behind you. But you 3, you then get to the new 5, and we'll touch on why here. But the first 3 that we knew were going to be changed were out of the South, and Jeff Burns, the athletics director at Randolph-Macon, takes over that. We also knew we needed a new one out of the East, and Bob McMahon from Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, takes that role. We also knew, because Ken Schumann is leaving, the West needed a new representative, and that is going to be Brian Van Hofteren from Buena Vista. Yes, I said it correctly for all of you who know Hoopsville so well. He joins the ranks. Now, that gets us to the three we knew we were going to replace, but there are now two new replacements also. Mike McGrath and Lindbergh from the Northeast, Mike McGrath from the Midwest, are leaving this year for personal reasons, and those positions are not yet filled. Am I right?
That's correct, Dave. Yeah, those positions should be filled within the next month, which is plenty of time. Our first conference call, and when we get things going as a committee, usually isn't until around the first week of October. So anything that needs to be handled, and until then, if anything comes up, for instance, I'll be going to some meetings in Indianapolis in September. Those will get taken care of quickly.
And something else I should mention, it should be interesting to see who takes those positions, because if people may or may not know, the committee is made up of 4 and 4 of essentially of administrators and of basketball coaches. Some of them are both or have experience in both in some senses. Terry Small and Steve Ulrich obviously are administrators. You technically would be a coach, though it throws a wrinkle in there. You could be considered an administrator as well. Jeff Burns is an administrator. McVeigh and Van Hofteren, I believe, are coaches. So the next two could be any number of possibilities here, depending on how they kind of sit yourself and others as either administrators or coaches.
That's correct, and Brian Van Haften from Buena Vista is in the same situation with me, where he's an assistant athletic director as well. So it even, I think, provides more flexibility for the nominating committee at the NCAA to fill those two positions. Yeah. And I don't think maybe a lot of our listeners may not know this, but our committee has no say in the selection of those two spots. It's a purely NCAA nominating committee process, I believe.
Which I can see the benefits and the drawbacks to that. I can see the benefits in the sense that there's maybe no, back in the old days, no boys network, no elbow, hey, I'll take care of you type thing if you take care of me type thing. But at the same time, you don't get a say on who's on your committee, which can be a blessing and a curse.
Exactly, and your only hope as a member of this committee for 3 years. I've served with some people on the committee. Everybody on the committee I've served with has been committed to the committee, has been committed to Division III basketball, and you just hope that the new members that come on have that same commitment.
And another thing that's new liaison, John Williams leaves the NCAA after, I think, decades of work. I can't remember the exact number. He's moved on himself, and you have a new liaison who certainly, resume-wise, seems to have some experience.
Yeah, Elisa Halpin is our new liaison, our new John Williams, if you will. She has been the executive assistant of championships and alliances at the NCAA for a while now, and she'll be the coordinator for the Division III tournament. So I'm really looking forward to working with her. And we've also worked with a woman in the past from the NCAA named Linda Godby, who was John's assistant, and the NCAA is in the process of hiring an assistant for Elisa to help her with this.
So she can pass on the responsibilities if never necessary.
Exactly,
with everything else she is doing.
Yes.
So that gives you 5 new committee people. You're new committee chair, but certainly have plenty of experience, having been there for 3 years already. And you have a new liaison. You hinted at it earlier. You're plenty of time to kind of get everybody up to speed. But at the same time, it would have been nice if you also had maybe a little bit more this summer to get everybody up to speed, I'm sure.
Yeah, it definitely, Dave. But I'm really confident that the people that will end up serving on this committee are all professionals. They all would not be on the committee unless they didn't want to be. So I think we're going to get a great effort, and I'm looking forward to working with a lot of these guys, most of these guys. Jeff Burns was able to come to our meeting in Indianapolis. Brian and Bob have great reputations from their schools, and hopefully the two new people in the Midwest and the Northeast can step right in.
Talking to Coach Mike DeWitt from Ohio Wesleyan, the new chair of the Division III Men's Basketball National Committee, here on a Hoopsville on-demand podcast for you. Obviously, we're recording this, so we can't take any of your questions now, but if you ever do have questions, email us at hoopsville, d3hoops.com. Follow us on Twitter at d3hoopsville, or use the hashtag Hoopsville, and you can also... let's see, there's other ways. d3hoopsville.com is your website, and follow us on Facebook, I should say, as well. What are your goals going in here, Coach, as a new committee chair? I know you and I have talked in Salem and here that, and there's been the perception from outside that the committee kind of took a step backwards in 2011, 2012. however you want to read it. There's many ways you could read it, though I think the tournament was good and the bracket was pretty solid, but there was a feeling of, things had gone maybe a little off the track of where things had been headed. So what are your goals heading into the 12-13 season?
Well, I think from the outside it might look that way. I think we had some things thrown at us at a committee that were out of our control, and we as a committee did the best we could to, like you said, make the tournament a good experience and to get the selections right. And I think ultimately we accomplished that goal. My goal as chair is to kind of continue the committee's great work. I've worked for some great chairs, some of whom you've mentioned, in your introduction there was Ken Schumann and Dave Martin and Charlie Brock are the three chairs I've worked with, and they did a great job of guiding the committee in the right direction, and everybody else I've worked with on this committee is a top-notch person. I just like to continue that level of work and level of excellence, and I'm hoping, I think we'll have the people on the committee that'll be able to do that. And I think the second goal I have is to be as transparent as possible. I don't, that's nothing secret as to what we're doing. We have, when we're ranking teams and selecting teams, we have criteria in place that everybody knows what they are. I think it's incumbent upon us to have people understand how we're making the decisions we're making. So I think that transparency is a big issue. And I think we want to even increase that and work at that as we go into 2012, 2013.
You talk about the transparency, and last year there was plenty of confusion as to whether that final regional ranking was going to be released or not. It turns out it was really a mandate from above that no final regional rankings were going to be released, even though we kind of got used to them, especially on the basketball side of things, or not used to them, but we appreciated them, because I don't know how long you can get used to them when they had just started, essentially. I know there's still a push to say, listen, those final regional rankings are important, and we can touch on even how more important they are here in just a minute, but is there another push from you, from others, from Division III to push the NCAA and go, come on, this non-releasing while saying we're transparent is a little bit hypocritical?
I agree with you 100%, Dave. It's very hypocritical. At our last committee meeting in June, our group as a committee, and I know the National Association of Basketball Coaches, the NABC, feels the same way, that we'd like the championships committee to consider letting us release the last regional rankings. It'll just eliminate a lot of confusion and a lot of guesswork from people who are wondering what our committee did that last week. Hopefully, I think the championships committee meets in September in Indianapolis. Hopefully, that's going to be one of the topics of discussion, is releasing those regional rankings, at least for basketball. I think, again, our committee wants to be as transparent as possible. We want those rankings to be released.
What do you think the chances are, honestly?
Not knowing the NCAA championship structure and whether it's easy or not to get these things changed, I don't know. So I can't give you an intelligent answer to that. I know the question will come up, and hopefully it'll be considered.
Again, talking to Coach Mike DeWitt, head coach at Ohio Wesleyan and chairman of the Division III Men's Basketball National Committee. Should say that Ken Schumann is technically the committee chair until September. That's technically when the reins will be handed over to Mike, but obviously in the June to September area, Mike certainly takes over more and Ken steps aside. So in case everyone's confused, then go to look up all this information online. That's why you're going to find it a little bit different. One of the things that I think we a lot of people got frustrated with last season, and maybe why things felt like they took a step backwards and really did not help that the final regional rankings were not released, was there seemed to be a lot of inconsistency between the RACs, the regional advisory committees from each region, all 8. If everybody doesn't know those, the Northeast, East, Atlantic, Mid-Atlantic, South, Great Lakes, Midwest, and West on the men's side. It seemed like in one committee they would think A, in another committee they would think B. I think one of the big examples would have been Albertus Magnus out of the Northeast and Birmingham Southern, as you and I discussed, out of the South. They were treated differently with very similar numbers in the sense of win-loss and strength of schedule numbers. One committee would think one way, one committee would think the other. When I talked to Ken Schumann about what the attitude was going in this year or into that year, he said that you guys would, as a national committee, would stand off and it would allow the RACs to figure things out, and then at the final regional ranking step in and go, okay, we kind of hinted at what we needed to do. It didn't happen, so we're going to make a change, or congratulations, you worked your way to a point where we think these regional rankings are pretty solid. We're not going to touch them. The problem is we didn't see the final regional rankings. What's with this inconsistency on the RACs? Is there a message coming down from you guys in the national level like, hey, this is how we read this. We realize each region's different, but let's at least show we're all on the same page a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that the whole voting procedure for the RACs changed last year, and I don't think that was communicated to anybody very well. And I know it was a surprise to a lot of coaches at the convention down in New Orleans this year. The RACs this year voted in a way where discussion was had on a conference call, and then everybody on the RAC, with the exception of the chair who doesn't vote, would get off the call, go to get on the internet through a website by the NCAA and vote individually after they had discussed it on the call. Previously, the vote would be done on the call, and the regional chair, who is the national committee member, would then present those rankings in a national committee call the next day. So it was a little different, and again, it came from, I believe, the championships committee. I hate to throw everything on the championships committee here, but I think that's where this stuff comes from, and rightly so. But the reason for that change was, again, I don't necessarily agree with this, but the reason for the change was there was some concern that people felt uncomfortable. A call can get dominated by strong personalities, so people weren't voting the way they really felt, so they would discuss it, get off the call, and they could vote the way they want. The bad part about that was that if they didn't speak up on the call as to how they were feeling, and then the voting came out, then the regional chair was surprised this year at how the vote came out because no discussion had taken place. So it was tough for the regional chairs to kind of guide the vote or to maybe communicate as to what was going on in other regions, which is one of our goals, is to keep things consistent nationally. It was tougher to do that this year in the regional rankings because each committee was voting, like you said, they were voting differently and treating teams in different ways. So again, that's what made it difficult, and the rankings did vary a little bit in how we treated certain teams, and those certain teams with, as we've talked about, great won-loss percentages, but maybe not so good strength of schedules are always the toughest teams to try to rank. And our RACs treated them a little differently this year without the ability for the National Committee to make adjustments as mandated by the Championships Committee or so, I believe. So that's why the regional rankings were maybe inconsistent from region to region. However, the National Committee was still allowed in the last regional ranking, was able to make adjustments for selections.
Let me just throw out the devil's advocate on a couple of these things and just get your take on it. First off, as a regional committee and a chair on that regional committee, and I know you're the chair on the Great Lakes, but, it almost seems that if someone's dominating the conversation, the chair needs to step in and go, okay, enough. I want to hear from A. I want to hear from B, and force those other people to speak up on their points of view instead of just disconnecting and getting surprised on a call. Furthermore, as you point out, somebody could just sit there, not discuss anything, completely disagree with everybody, maybe chat with his other buddies, and then have their vote change, and that has dramatic effect. Granted, ultimately, the committee can change everything at the end, but the fans are sitting there absolutely confused.
True. And I would say that our basketball committee never felt there was a problem with the way the voting was done in the past. We felt our committee members did a good job of getting discussion and involving everybody and coming to a consensus. So this change, again, was given to us I don't want to say against our will, but we wouldn't have agreed to do it this way. And so, but it's the way we had to do it. So what we tried to do as a national committee was go back to our committees after the vote and say, look, we need to deal with certain situations consistently across the country. Let's try to do that as we rank the teams. Was it perfect? No, but I think it got better as the rankings went along toward the end.
It also seems like it handcuffs the committee chair when we get to the selections. When you guys sit around with your, the team that is now the top ranked, whatever a case, whether the automatic qualifier removed some of the top ranks or one was already selected. You got the, for visual effect, you got your placard that says Team A. Everybody's got their teams around there, and when the vote isn't all that consistent, especially in practices, the committee chair for that rack's got to be sitting there going, well, I really don't know why they're third. I can't argue for why they're third. They're up. It almost seems like it hamstrings the national committee.
It does a little bit. It made it more difficult because the national committee did not have the ability this past year to adjust the regional committee rankings to make it consistent on a national basis. And that was, quite honestly, from my standpoint, pretty frustrating.
Quickly, how do you go forward? How do you adjust for what happened and the experiences you guys have to make sure that there aren't those surprises and maybe the message is drilled in a little bit more clearly?
Yeah, if we have to do it this way again, I think as a national committee member, we have to maybe educate our RAC members a little more clearly on just the big picture nationally, and go from there. Or else it could be that we could run into the same situation. But I think we can educate. You can educate all you want. You can say how the national committee will probably deal with something at the end all you want. But you may still have people who disagree with that and are going to vote the way they want, which is fine. That's their prerogative. It just makes our life a little more difficult.
Speaking of educating, it still seems coaches either thumb their nose or are completely ignorant or don't know or have figured out. I mean, you got the wide range here of what the criteria is to making to getting regionally ranked appropriately, to thus making the NCAA tournament or being seeded, use that term loosely, appropriately in the NCAA tournament. This is pretty important considering coming up things are going to be slightly changed. We'll touch on that in a second, but right now, it still seems to me that coaches either haven't figured out this new system, and we've been doing it for a couple of years, or flat out are whatever. I don't care. I'll scream bloody murder later, and it dates back to, I know, times where the committee has tried to educate coaches, and very, very, very less than 1% decided to take part in those efforts. Is that still a frustration?
It sure is, and I know exactly what you're talking about. We did, as you know, and I think you were on the call, we did a webinar last year during our committee meeting in June of last year, and only it was about 30 people participated on the webinar, and we went through kind of step-by-step how we rank teams in region and the adjustments the committee makes nationally. And then people get frustrated. Again, in my opinion, you would think we've been in this system long enough by now, and we've been in it, at least the time I've been on the national committee, so that's at least 3 years, where people should know the process and know the criteria and know the strength of schedule things and those kind of things. But again, you have new coaches coming in, you have people who don't like the criteria in the first place, and you just, again, it's a continual education process.
Well, and they will change. 13-14, we get the new effort in where all games will count, provided a team plays 70% of their games in region. Now, that's great for the American Southwest Conference, who play about 20 games in their conference. That takes care of the 70%, but there's schools like the NESCAC, which actually do a pretty good job, but they play one round robin, so that means more regional games are going to be needed, essentially. I think most of them take care of that. But you get some other outliers who maybe don't schedule a lot of in-region opponents, either travel out of region to play opponents or take on non-Division threes, and that's their prerogative. But it now puts a big onus on them because if they don't hit that 70% mark, they might not even make the NCAA tournament, and they could be the best team in their region.
Yeah, that very well could happen. I mean, I guess being on the national committee, my advice is make sure you play 70% of your games in region, beginning in 2013, 2014. And again, I'm pretty sure that's an across-the-board NCAA Division III mandate as well. So, and I think schools can still apply for a waiver to get out of that 70% mandate. So, there's still options. I think, when we talked about this too, I think if you look at it, I think it was over 98% of teams do currently play over 70% of their games in region right now anyway. So it's not going to affect a lot of people, but it's something people need to make sure they look at and pay attention to.
And something else that's coming, and by the way, we could go into the waiver thing and jump off another whole bridge and be another 15 minutes. I'm not going to get into it. This is a year away. We have time to chat about it. But another thing that's also important is the possibility. There's been a lot of talk, speculation, innuendo, whatever you want to say, that the 13-14 season will also bring regional alignment, regional realignment. Say that 20 times fast. I know they were nearly there and then took a step back to reevaluate things when they realized there were some snags and some problems, which I applaud. And now they're moving forward, and it certainly indicates that at this point next year, we could be talking about new regions across the board in all sports, by the way. Lacrosse, has 2 regions. We could be talking about 4. These are little details that give you an idea. But in basketball, that could make a major change. If you don't know your in-region criteria and you have new regions to deal with, this could be a huge impact if you're not paying attention as a head coach.
Yeah, as a head coach and as an athletic department, I think people need to make sure they're paying attention. And I agree with you 100%. I think the regional realignment piece, I think they realize that different sports need different regions for a variety of reasons. I am happy to share with you that our committee set up a subcommittee with the women's basketball, the Division III basketball committee, and we have been working on a proposal to just align men's and women's basketball in the same region, starting in 13-14, which I think is long overdue. And just as an example, just to name the regions the same, because in men's basketball we call it the Midwest region, and in the women it's called the Central region. And just doing little things like that, and not having a women's team in one region and a men's team in another region, just kind of cleaning up the regions, but also evening out the regions so that the regional ranking process isn't unwieldy. And I'll give you an example in men's and women's, I think, but in the Northeast region for our men, it's almost twice as big as some of the other regions, and we're ranking 11 teams in the Northeast and ranking 5 or 6 in the Great Lakes, for example. Well, I think part of the mandate, again, coming down from the NCAA is that we need to even those things out to make the regions a little more equal in terms of number of teams. Yeah. So I think that's one of the positives that will come out of realignment going into 13-14.
Yeah, we won't go down the road either how they're going to do that, because the Northeast is going to be the biggest elephant in the room, how to figure out how to deal with that with the East and the Atlantic nearby, but causing other issues. I know the presidents have said they'd like to keep the conferences all in one region, and while I understand that, I think that might be a major hang-up, especially in the Northeast, but we won't dive into that because I've vented on it before, and we don't need to waste another 10, 15 minutes on that either. But certainly it's that other element of things where people need to be paying attention. Let me quickly ask, though, when it does come to regional realignment, as a basketball coach and you're getting ready to schedule your season, when do you really need to know what those regional alignments are going to be so you can appropriately schedule your season for 13-14?
That is a tremendous point, Dave. I mean, and we're scheduling. We'll schedule for basically a year in advance. So starting in September, we'll schedule for 13-14. So that's a great point. I'm hoping a decision can come fairly soon, so we can adjust our schedules accordingly to play in-region games if we need to make that adjustment.
I know making an adjustment was one of the issues when it came to the new Division III playoff structure, with the Division III teams joining Division II and Division I. I shouldn't say joining Division II. Division III and Division II combined to join Division I in Atlanta next year in this coming season to celebrate the 75th anniversary of men's basketball championship tournament action. A couple things went against this. One, it was so late in the process of being decided that the 12-13 seasons pretty much had already been set. The dates had been set. Conference schedules are pretty much set in place. So adding weeks to the men's basketball schedule wasn't easy. And then because of Easter, primarily, and probably to make sure the tournament's in April for CBS, the men's basketball tournament on Division I level went 1 week later. If everyone remembers, it's kind of a nice system. The Division III championships on the first weekend of the Division I, the Division II's championships on the second weekend of Division I, and then you have the Division I championship. This year there's an extra week, so essentially if everything had stayed the same, Division III's championship would have been on conference championship finales for Division I. So we've added a week and to just the D1 schedule, and now you're adding a bunch of weeks to the Division III schedule to get this all put in place with no adjustment to the overall schedule. So, essentially, between conference championships and the championship for Division III, there's 6 weeks.
Yes.
And I know, by the way, I should say, NCAA came out with a terrific article about this alignment. And I say terrific because I think Gary Brown for NCAA.com did a very good job of pointing out the two different sides of this. Your committee in June decided that you wanted to go with a format that took the first weekend of March off. Then the next weekend would play the traditional pod of the first 2 rounds, getting us down to 16 teams. Then the next weekend would just be the 16 teams, which would normally have been, if anyone's keeping track, the championship weekend, and it will be in Division III women. The following weekend, Salem hosts the Elite Eight and Final Four. I know that's not technically allowed to be used as words, but the final 8 teams and the final 4 teams will play on that weekend. Then there is a week off. This is your proposal, and the championship played in Atlanta. The management committee came back and said, we appreciate what you're thinking, at least according to the article, but we have some problems with some things and blah, 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 and the pod in the first weekend was blown out. So get this, folks. Division III men will play first round on the first weekend of March, second round on the second weekend of March, third round on the third weekend of March, then play the Elite Eight Final Four in Salem, then take a week off, then play the championship. I know which way you guys sided. Give me your argument as to why.
First of all, let me just say that when our committee caught wind of this early in the last season, we were really excited about the opportunity to showcase Division III basketball on a somewhat bigger stage in Atlanta. We thought that would be really cool, and then we all stepped back and thought about it and said, wait a minute, how are we going to conduct a 6-week tournament, which has traditionally been played in 3 weeks? And our committee, not officially discussing it, but just discussing it amongst ourselves, and then when it finally came to it, we came to the conclusion that we thought keeping the tournament, as close to what we currently do would be the most beneficial and the easiest, and keeping it condensed and not spreading it out over the 6 weeks. So that's why our committee felt that taking that first week off and then playing the traditional pod system the second week would be better. We discussed the 1 game a week scenario leading up to Salem as well, but our committee we just felt that it would be a better tournament experience for the student athletes and the teams participating in it if we took the week off. The championships committee didn't feel the same way, and the management council felt the same as the championships committee, so we're going to play 1 game a week up to Salem, which our committee completely understands the structure, and we get that we can get overruled, and that's fine. That there were so many positives and negatives to both tournament formats that it's going to be an adjustment no matter what. So, we'll run the tournament given the way we're told, and hopefully it'll be a good experience for everybody. But that was kind of our thinking as a committee, is just to keep it. We weren't asking for a lot of changes, only the changes that were going to have to be made given the extension of the tournament to 6 weeks. So, and honestly, some coaches felt very strongly they didn't want to take that first week off as well. So, I think you probably had half the people leaning one way, half the people leaning the other way, and everybody just knowing it's going to hopefully just be for a year. We'll just deal with it and move forward. So that's where we're at.
I should point out, if they do this for more than 1 year, if they ever think that this is an idea they want to continue, the massive changes have to take place. For starters, an adjustment to the basketball season so that we aren't necessarily playing 6 games in 6 weeks to determine a national title. Conferences are certainly not going to be thrilled if they're going to have different schedules for the men's and women's basketballs, the doubleheaders and stuff like that. So you have to imagine the women's schedule would have to be adjusted accordingly as well, which opens up the Division III playing at the same time as Division I. By the way, I should point out they are working to have this event for Division III women as well in the coming years to celebrate women's basketball. So there's a lot of things that have to take place if this is going to be a yearly event like lacrosse where you host everything at one site. Everything I've heard and et cetera, this is a 1-year experience.
And that's where our committee's heard that too. And like you said, and that's a big if they decide that they want to do this on a yearly basis, then some adjustments are going to have to be made to when our playing when our playing season is, so we can adjust when the tournaments are taking place, and then you're moving things probably back a couple weeks. And
do you start at November 15? Do you start the end of November? Do you end up adding games to keep from being gaps in there? Because if you leave it a 25-game schedule, December and January are pretty much not going to be playing basketball for a month. Or teams somewhere are going to be taking weeks off. So lots of ramifications.
Sure, and I don't even want to think about that right now. Let's just get through next year, and let's make this tournament the best experience we can, and our committee will do that, and we'll go forward. And I would like to just kind of reiterate what you said. The article by Gary Brown on NCAA.org is tremendous, and it explains the entire process thoroughly. And again, it's transparent, and people like transparent. If they want to read the whole process,
that's good.
Read the article because it's really good.
Yeah, I got to give him credit. He definitely presented both sides of the argument very fairly. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's not an ignoring of the Division III men's basketball committee. I think he took it very well and wrote it very well. This article, not right now on the What We're Reading section of D3Hoops.com, will hopefully be there in the near future. If not, go to NCAA.org. If you go to NCAA.org and click on the Division III link, you'll find the article relatively easily on their page. One of the big advantages that this tournament is going to be successful is because of Salem. Let's be fair here. They're moving their weekend back a week further into March. If that does not happen, Salem may lose the chance to host, period, and it adds a bunch of wrinkles into how you guys would have put this together. Salem agreeing to move one weekend down and then host the Elite Eight Final Four. I think that's a pretty major part and key to this.
Agreed 100%, Dave. And if anybody who's ever met the people at Salem and Carrie Harvey Cutter know they treasure having the tournament there. They understand the Division III experience, and quite honestly, it was we award the championship on a 2-year basis. Salem was awarded the championship next year. I mean, that's how fast this happened. The Atlanta experience happened. Yeah. So. Kerry and his people moved the week that they had the Civic Center available in Salem back a week, I think, for us. And honestly, my own personal feeling is we wanted to make that experience just as good for the teams as the 2 teams that end up going to Atlanta. And that's one of the exciting parts about this for me, and I think the rest of our committee, is that now 8 teams get to go to Salem. And that's going to be a really neat weekend for the 8 teams that qualify. And, Salem's, they've hosted so many championships before. Yeah. They've hosted 18 championships. They know how to do it.
ODAC championship on both the men's and women's side in the same weekend. Yeah.
And let's not forget, the people at the ODAC as well. Right. Brad Bankston and his staff, again, are tremendous in conducting and helping run the Division III championship. And for basketball and other sports, and they had to make a huge adjustment as well. So again, that's I think kind of neat, and one of the things I'm looking forward to personally is going to Salem and playing the 8 team down to 2 round there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll talk with Brad Bankston and Carrie Harvey Cutter hopefully sometime as we get closer to the season starting. They have a lot of things to figure out with 8 teams there, trying to have the same experience of community service. They usually had a banquet. We'll see if they're able to pull that off as well, and try and give the student athletes and their fans as much of a great experience as they always do for just 4 teams and the All-Star game. And by the way, I'm not tackling the All-Star game right now. We have not talked to enough people to figure out what they're doing with the All-Star game this year, so I'm not even going to tackle that or even touch it. But Salem certainly has got a lot on their plate to do. I know they're capable of doing it, but it'll be interesting to see. But really, again, it took them moving this. Otherwise, you guys would have had a lot of different scenarios that Division III hasn't had to tackle before.
Yeah, and then the only semi-controversial part of the tournament format, it wasn't 8 teams going to Salem and taking a week off or 2 weeks off and going to Atlanta. It was how to get to Salem.
Yeah.
And again, it's 50-50. There's good and bad to both formats, I think. And, so again, the people of Salem just doing what they're doing makes this work for us. And again, it benefits the experience of the student athletes that get to go to Salem that weekend.
Talking to head coach Mike DeWitt of Ohio Wesleyan, the Division III men's basketball committee chair this year. Coach, let me ask one more thing about this tournament that I know people are going to have concerns about, or I even know probably you guys do. I have been told that the committee is not going to be punished for having to send teams to Atlanta, which they're not usually punished for sending teams to Salem, budget-wise. They're also probably not going to be punished for having to send 8 teams to Salem, because if you were, that's pretty much your travel budget. It's gone, or you're going to have to do some really uncreative bracketing to keep as many flights down. Yeah. So then it adds the question, obviously they're going to still give you a travel budget per se for those early rounds. For starters, I know you probably haven't heard officially yet. I'm assuming you're going to lobby to make sure you guys still have as much creativity as you can in those early rounds.
I would assume that as well. I mean, I think the creativity aspect, especially the 3 years I've served on a committee, has made the tournament better, and we certainly want to continue at that. And I hope we are not constrained any more than we currently are with the geographical aspect of it. I can't, I certainly don't see the NCAA blowing the doors wide open and saying and flying teams all over the country. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think we'll probably still be under the same considerations with regard to number of flights and things like that in the early rounds. And one of the I think good aspects of going one game a week, quite frankly, is a couple years ago we had, I think, and I'm using them as an example, but Whitworth had a great team, and because of their geographic location, had to travel and not play.
I think they had traveled to Great Lakes, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they had to go to Worcester. As a matter of fact, the way this works out, if say a team is isolated like Whitworth was that year, the flight's going to happen one way or the other.
Right.
So we can, as a committee, select the host based upon something other than geography, which I think, it could, it certainly would have been an advantage for Whitworth 2 years ago. It could be, it could help us in, making it a fairer experience for teams like that.
On the flip side of that, though, that first round could open up some problems if you say have 2 teams in Texas or only 2 teams on the West Coast, or you have 2 teams from the same region, aka some areas, or I should say 2 teams from the same conference in the same region, and your travel budget's restricted. I know if it's not written, it's known. Keep conference foes away from each other in the first round. If you have to deal with in the second, so be it. I'm not saying it is going to happen, but we all know how this bracket can get put together sometimes, and we all know there's upsets that take place, and we all know that sometimes you get left with 2 isolated teams who are from the same conference, a.k.a. California, a.k.a. Texas, that your only choice, I wouldn't say only choice, but the NCAA might say, well, we're not going to approve a flight. And guess what? You got 2 conference foes you got to play in the first round.
Yeah, and, again, that's one of the arguments our committee brought up as one of the negative aspects of playing the 1 game a week, given the current travel restrictions. So, again, the championships committee and the management council has weighed that and considered other factors more important as they approved the tournament format. So
yeah, in some ways your flexibility kind of disappears.
Yeah, it does. And again, I think our committee will at least try to have the discussion if that situation occurs. Can we possibly, I think I would be negligent if it wasn't brought up by our committee. Look, can we not have that situation occur if at all possible? And again, if we get denied, then we'll do it and play that game. You could have a team playing a conference tournament game against the same team, and then playing the first round NCAA tournament against that same team. That's definitely not optimal and something we want to do, but we'll only do it if we have to do it.
A couple quick things I should note, by the way. This also can open up the chance that a team like an Amherst or whoever could host both men and women on the first weekend. Obviously, the alternating of hosting for a pod kind of goes out the window since there is the ability to host both men and women on a Saturday. We kind of saw that last year at Amherst. This year it opens it wide open for both men and women. Just want to point that out to everybody else. The other thing, too, that is interesting, and of course it just escapes my mind, but we have 2 teams that get bye weeks, so they're going to get that week off anyway while everybody else is playing some basketball. Quickly, I assume the scouting rules are going to be how do you...
Quite frankly, Dave, we had a lot of the particular details have not been worked out yet.
So I got you.
Something we'll do in our first couple conference calls. Also, I wouldn't necessarily make the assumption that a team can host both that first weekend or second weekend, and I'm not sure of the rotation this year.
Well, the NCAA's got that rule, and Amherst got to take advantage of that because the Amherst had a bye in that first weekend. The women hosted, and the men and women both played on Saturday, with the women having to play, I think, at 4 and the men playing at 7. That's in the handbook that can be done. The rotational period gives it to the women this time in the first weekend.
Yeah, and I think our committee hasn't thought this through enough yet. We haven't had enough discussion since this just was approved a week or so ago, that say you have a men's team eligible to host the first round and a women's team hosting a pod. Can
it happen both weekends?
Yeah, it could. Are we going to try to, for example, play the women's games on Friday night, play the men's game Saturday afternoon, and then the women's final game of the pod Saturday night? Are we going to be able to do that? Those are questions that still need to be answered.
Yeah, well, I know in the book, and obviously the book can change. Last year it was women had to play early and the men played late. But again, a lot of things to cover, and we can't cover them all. This is just late July, early August after all. There's other things to tackle down the road. You still need to get 2 more committee members put on the squad so you guys can hash it all out. Talking to Coach Mike DeWitt of Ohio Wesleyan, and Coach, I appreciate you chatting about all the Division III committee things. It would be remiss of me if we didn't tackle quickly your team. You're entering your 14th year. You had a pretty good, successful one last year, 20-8 overall. You were 11-5 in a what turned out to be a pretty tough conference. You bring back a lot of guys, though you lose somebody. Tim Brady, those 22.5 points a game are gone. He's the only senior, essentially, of that magnitude leaving. You lose one other guy as well, which makes it look like you're loaded. Obviously, guys have got to still come in, and you lose a ton from Brady at 22.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, shooting 45+%, from the field, and 37 beyond the arc. You lose him. But you have a lot of guys behind him. Are you confident about how you guys are lining up, especially going into a tough conference this coming season?
Well, first of all, in your introduction, when you said we have 2.5 months to our first practice, that scared the crap out of me.
Less than 80 days, Coach.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. to answer your question, you described our situation perfectly. We only lose one person. However, that one person was a second-team All-American and averaged 22 points a game. So I do think with what we have returning, our guys will be excited to try to make up for Tim's departure, and it won't be just one person. I know that's a cliche. It won't be just one person making it up. It'll be 8 or 9 guys pitching in. We've got a chance, honestly, to be a good team. I mean, when you return this many people and from a team that was able to gain, some experience in the NCAA tournament last year.
Right.
I'm very optimistic about how we will do next year. You touched on our conference a little bit. It's improved dramatically over the past 5 or 6 years. We qualified 3 teams for the tournament last year, rightly so, I think. And it's with the addition of DePaul to our league as well.
Yeah.
That makes it even better, and they're going to be better. So it's a difficult conference, and I know everybody says that, but it's and that's a long way away, I know, but I like our chances to compete in our conference for sure.
You'll be doing it with one less coach yet again. Mark Bollinger left to go head coach at Piedmont. It's yet another Ohio Wesleyan assistant under your tutelage who has found a head coaching gig.
They must not like it here too well.
Apparently.
They keep leaving, Dave. But yeah, we're happy for Mark to go to Piedmont. He's a great coach and will do a great job and coaching their program. And that's one of the things. We touched on this a little bit. I'm really proud of the fact that my assistants do go on to become head coaches and successful head coaches at the Division III level. That's, I think, one of my responsibilities is to nurture and help guys in their career, and I'm really, it's one of the things I'm most proud of here is that our guys go on and they're good guys and they go on and do good jobs at other schools.
And obviously you're entering your 14th year at Ohio Wesleyan with the Battling Bishops. Does it get any easier?
Nope. Not at all. I mean, things keep adjusting. We've talked about the NCAA and the tournament adjustments and stuff like that. Well, coaching's a constant adjustment, from the way kids communicate anymore with texting and Twitter and all that stuff. And, it's something new all the time, which I guess keeps you young, but it keeps you on your toes too.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine nowadays. Hey, I appreciate you joining me. I know I've taken quite a big chunk out of your time. I told you it'd be shorter than our previous conversation, and I don't think I did that much better at it. But I certainly appreciate you taking the time to join me. As always, we give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to make sure that people out there here, even in beginning of August, as they're listening to this, kind of get as a point?
A couple things, Dave. Thanks for the opportunity. First, I just want to assure our coaches, our administrators, our fans that our committee is going to do their very best to correct and improve some of the things that need to be worked on, and to conduct this one-time tournament as best we can. And again, one of the goals I think is to maintain the experience for the student athlete, and I think that's our charge. And I think we'll hopefully people trust us to do that, because that's what we want to do. And secondly, I want to let all your listeners know that you're about to be a father again.
Yes.
And we had to squeeze this in on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. You never know.
So you could go on and do more important things this week. I just want to wish you the best of luck in that this week as well, and hopefully things go well.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate that. Yeah, the clock is ticking, as it were, and so I appreciate you taking some time to get this in as well before I book a time and say, listen, I'll get back to you in 2 weeks. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I know I took a ton of time out of the day. So I appreciate that. Good luck as you end your summer and start the school year. Obviously, we'll chat in between now and then and give fans a chance to ask questions down the road as well.
And that'd be great, Dave. Anytime you want me on Hoopsville during the year, feel free to call. I'd be glad.
How about every week? Let's just do it every week, right after the regional rankings.
Maybe not every week, but maybe when it gets into February and we're doing the rankings and all that, feel free. I'd be glad to share what we're doing. Again, transparency is, I think we're incumbent to be as transparent and open as we can. We have nothing to hide. People may disagree with some of the things we're saying, but it's not We don't make decisions on a whim. It's well thought out, and I'm not afraid to share those things.
Well, I appreciate that very much. I know the fans will appreciate that as well. Mike DeWitt, head coach, Ohio Wesleyan men's basketball, and the chairman of the Division III men's basketball committee. Thanks so much for taking a good chunk of your day out of it for me.
Thanks, Dave. Good talking to you.
Thank you. You too. Appreciate Coach joining us here on the Hoopsville Hotline. We'll wrap this up quickly. Again, he answered a ton of questions, but if you have any other questions for us, you can email us at hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Email us also. You can also email me. It's at the bottom of your screen. Follow us on Twitter at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. You can also follow us on Facebook. Just look up Hoopsville or go to facebook.com/Hoopsville with a capital H. And you can join us, obviously, at D3Hoopsville.com. We will post this interview here shortly, and hopefully you'll be able to enjoy it as well. Again, any questions, let us know. Appreciate Coach Mike DeWitt joining us here on the Hoopsville Hotline on this Hoopsville On Demand special podcast for you here in the offseason. Look for more to come. We'll even try and talk to the women's basketball committee chair. We believe it's a new one, but I haven't gotten any official press release on it yet, so I got to do some work, and we'll try and get her on as well to talk about their upcoming 12 and 13 season. Thanks again to Coach Mike DeWitt. Thank you for joining us here on Hoopsville. I certainly appreciate it. Have a good rest of your summer, and look for more Hoopsville On Demand podcasts down the road. Goodbye, everybody.